Welcome back to the Cinnamon Effect. I'm Kimberly Hand, and today I have Charlene, Boldrin, and Taylor Snowney in the studio with me. They are the founders of Nurses to Nurture, which offers integrative doula services that support people in various stages of life, including post-surgery, navigating a new diagnosis during the IVF process, postpartum, and end of life, to name a few. Together, they are nurses of 13 years, certified in clinical homeopathy, trained in Vater method lymphatic drainage, and have spent time together as both postpartum and birth doulas. Their goal is to fill in the gaps in the healthcare system reflected in their motto, empower, nourish, and sustain. Together, they are fostering a community that recognizes comprehensive and quality care can be the difference in healing the body and the mind. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're my first duo in the studio, so I'm very excited to see two faces. This is a little different for me.
Well, like I said, I think we could talk pretty much all day. So
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I want to start. Well, let's first talk about what kind of brought us together. I was in the Bahamas last summer, and I met your really close friend, Samara.
Right.
And I remember, Samara's a doula. And so we were talking about birth experiences. We kind of like dove right in. As soon as I was like, oh, you're a doula? Okay, let's chat, And she was saying, you've got to meet my friend, Charlene. And she was not the first person that had told me about their friend, Charlene. And I was like, who is this girl? Like, I must meet her, right? So it took a little bit of time, and then we met, and then I met you. I think that was the same night, I think. I met both of you. Ended up, right? At the beach?
Night, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I was like, oh my gosh, like just some fantastic women that are really doing amazing things. And so, and now we're here podcasting. So it feels like a fun thing.
Yes, I love it. All the connections.
All the connections. And I love how life works that way. So thank you, Samara, for bringing us together, right?
Yes.
So I want to talk about the integrative doula and what that is. So how did you guys come to think that this was something that people needed? How did you come up with the term integrative doula? I love it because it feels like it encompasses so many different aspects of life and phases of life.
So I think I will go on to say that Charlene and I have been in each other's lives for a really long time now, to where we were doing what we're doing for others now for each other, and identifying that we were relying on each other in a way, even though we had so much of our own knowledge base, we were bouncing much of the same information back to us, that mirror of someone in your corner saying you're on the right track, you're doing the right thing, that's really kind of the foundation of where a lot of this started. We talk a lot about the gaps that we have found over the years, identifying those, being in them ourselves with family members or with children. And it was kind of like, there's still these pieces missing. Like, how can we help be a part of, this moving forward, or the solution as the world of medicine is changing so quickly around us? We still are so passionate about medicine, but we're also passionate about trying to, tap into other resources and modalities. It's kind of how do we make inform something that really kind of captures all of that? And we went back and forth, and we did just end up having to come to terms with finding a word for what this really looked like, what it meant, how we could put this on paper to identify what we were doing. And from there, Integrative Doula was born.
So I will say a little bit more. And so we have been in each other's lives for so long. And in nursing school, I think we really started to question things. And then I went into motherhood, and we're still questioning things. And then being in hospice for myself, I've been in many different worlds. Then we went into the birth world together, being birth doulas. A lot of times we share the same doula client. And then thinking, okay, a lot of this showing up in other people's lives, not just in the birth space, is like what we were doing when we were doulas together. And so I was like, well, we can't call it a birth doula. And then we came with the term integrative was born, because there were so many different aspects. It was hard to just pick one word for that. And that's how we kind of came up with the integrative doula.
Yeah, I love that, because when I was pregnant with my son, I think I was one of the first people that I knew, that had a doula. And I had a birth doula, and then I had a postpartum doula kind of lined up. And it was really a newer thing. And that was 8 years ago, And so now I love that I've seen, because the doula was so important in my whole journey. Like, I think I don't even know what would have happened if she would not have been around in that support role. So I love that you're taking it and saying, listen, I mean, yes, in birth, it's so important, and postpartum, but all these other phases of life, I know you guys said if you have a new, medical diagnosis or have just had surgery, you think about it kind of outside the realm of birth. And now I've definitely heard more and more about an end of life doula. Do you guys want to touch on that a little bit? Like, what is it? Because I find it so fascinating, like what an end of life doula does. I think a lot of people are not really familiar with that as much.
So our role in end of life doula would be, there's so many questions at end of life. I feel like it's just a concept that not a lot of people talk about, but how we come into play and how we come to play in every area when we come in is meeting with that family, that patient, and kind of gauging what that need is and looking at it from a physical standpoint, emotional standpoint, and using all our backgrounds as nurses, as caretakers, as a mother, as a friend, as a neighbor, and coming in there and saying, why don't we try these things? Why don't you ask these questions? How can we support not just the patient, but the client, but the caregiver as well, so that the whole family unit can thrive? And maybe for that one particular family unit, maybe they need more support with like nourishing foods or questions about that. Or maybe they need more support with asking their medical providers certain questions. Or maybe they want some homeopathic support, or maybe some book recommendations for younger kids. But because we have such a vast background in so many areas, it helps us to look at it as a whole, and each person is different. So that's why we often will meet with someone first and then kind of tailor the needs, make our suggestions, and form a game plan.
Yeah. I mean, I think you just in any situation is a person not really knowing the questions they even need to ask of a doctor or anybody in the care realm. So you guys educate based on, you have a lot of experience, personal experience too, is right? Yes. Like in that phase. Yeah. So do you want to talk a little bit about like your mother and what that process was like for you?
So I lost my mom at an early age at 22. And at that time I wasn't a nurse. I wasn't a massage therapist. I was just a student, a daughter. And we walked that process, and it was really confusing. But there were some really great caretakers at that time that I felt really supported us, and we were best case scenario. And my mom was very open and talked through the death and dying process. So I had a very positive experience of death and dying, partially because of the team of support of hospice, and then also with my own mom talking me through that. And I realized after years later, meeting multiple people. And so I often became that one friend who had already been through it. So a lot of people came to me or referred someone to me. Can you talk to them? Can you guide them about hospice? And I realized that having that good support helped us, get through it and not being scared of it. And I feel like death is such a taboo subject. A lot of people shy away from it, but I found that with really leaning in these times, you can make all the difference in someone's end of life. Yeah. And just like birth, death is a one-time shot, you don't get to do do-overs. So it's so important to leave the family feeling complete and that they had those final goodbyes. Yeah.
This is something that I have kind of heard about, the end of life review. What is that? Like, what is that about? I've heard people recently kind of talk more about this. I don't know if you want to touch on that.
So the end of life review is, and a lot of times they recommend doing that. Not everyone wants to do it, but I think if you're in a good space and that person can do that end of life review and talk about things openly, It helps for a more peaceful transition, and it also helps the family as well, because if you have someone that can't do that end of life review or there's fear involved, I feel like that's really hard for a family to process the transition or the death process. So if you can do that end of life review where you feel complete, you feel supported, it's just, it's a better outcome. But there's a lot of talk about that.
Yeah. Are you just prompting like discussions about things, or do you kind of facilitate that? Like, what goes into that? I'm intrigued by this.
I think, we don't do that specifically. I mean, we probably could facilitate that, but I know from a hospice standpoint, a lot of times the social worker will come in and sometimes they'll do like a memory box for their kids. And so it kind of triggers that, like maybe it'll be a photo album, or there's something that the family wants to leave behind for their kids to remember them by. Maybe it's cards or something to write for this birthday or this milestone as well. But the life review is through the social worker sometimes, or even a chaplain of a hospice, they can talk about, their past and what they've reconciled with. But I think just being able to talk about it openly and someone holding that space for them, because that's so rare. Again, a lot of people shy away from it, and that's what makes hospice so beautiful. Everyone in that environment, that's what they're trained for, is end of life. Whereas some people ask me, well, why can't I just get that care in the hospital setting? Well, that's not what they're trained for. They're trained to cure and keep pushing in the aggressive care, whereas hospice, the sole focus comes back to end of life review, comfort, quality. And then where we come back in is we're supporting the caregiver. We're looking at it from like a natural, homeopathic, the food, the nutrition, because now we're trying to take it back to the roots of really what we probably were before we became this fast-paced society of go, 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 bringing it back into the home and nourishing. So that's where Taylor and I come in a little bit more in supporting. So we don't take the place of hospice, but we come in to support that family and understanding and asking questions of their hospice services, if that's the route they choose to go.
So important for that extra support. I'm just I keep relating it to the birth process, but to have that added layer of someone who can really, take care of you. That the doctors are doing their set of, their skill set. So having that extra layer is so beautiful, I think, in that process. Taylor, I know you have experience in going through IVF and infertility. And so you are, filling a role with mothers going through this process, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, to go back even to all the things that Charlene is diving into is the integrative doula process. We're coming in, we have a nursing background, we have a nursing toolbox. We can relate to the things that medical providers are saying. We can help you advocate for yourself, but really we're coming in to help you merge the two of them together. So when you show up for somebody, whether it's death and dying or in the infertility process, I have a child with a rare disease condition. I navigated that right after I navigated the IVF process. When you're showing up for somebody, it's almost like when that person who walks through the door and you just have that sense of relief because you know that they're going to help me anticipate things that I don't even have to verbalize out of my mouth, that this is what I need, or this is what I want, or this might bring me comfort. And it is, sometimes that's to you physically, like really tailoring needs to a mother in that situation, or a someone who's trying to be a mother, or if it's anticipating the needs in your home, taking something off of your plate so something has been checked off, you can now turn into yourself. In regards to like specifically IVF and fertility, there's a lot of questions. And similarly, I think we've all experienced that in the birthing doula. When you have a birthing doula, you get to rely on them immediately. When you have a doula, you don't wait till you show up to labor and to start asking questions or to form that foundation with them. So when you bring on a fertility doula to help you through that process, is that someone who can be with you through that duration? And for some people, that's a short season. For other people, that's a longer season. And it's someone that you can go to for that emotional piece, even that maybe you're not receiving that validation of this being overwhelming in other places of your life. I think myself, if I can go back and speak on my experience, I had a great IVF experience. I thought that they handled it really well. The education aspect was there for me, but I was showing up as a nurse and a box of medication showed up at my door and I received, my voice message every day at, after 2:00 with what my lab work was and what my dose was. And this is what I needed to do. And I gave people medication on a regular basis. And when it became time to do it to myself, I was overwhelmed. And you can't even break into the emotional aspect of that. Just the actual necessary steps to be diving into the medical aspect, giving medication, self-administering, relying on your spouse or significant other to give you medication. It's having someone who can kind of meet you where you are, and it might be very different for you as it is for me, and what your needs are. I needed a lot of emotional support during that process. I felt isolated. I felt alone. I felt like nobody understood what I was going through. And just having someone to bounce feelings back who can also keep the perspective of now helping you stay focused on the next step of now we're going to do this for your medicine. We're not showing up as your nurse. We're not administering your medication for you, but we're showing up to help you feel empowered so that you can make these steps and feel like you are doing it. Like now take back your power.
Yes.
You're advocate for yourself, get yourself to the next step, because whatever that step looks like for you, this is for you to go through the process, just like birth. We can't do this for you, but let's hold your hand so you feel seen.
Yeah. Because I did not do any IVF, but it's like daily shots and things like that, right?
Right. Yeah. Multiple times a day. I mean, you're back and forth between the doctor's office for blood work. You're giving medications at multiple scheduled times of the day. And it can be really overwhelming for someone. I mean, again, for me, I was a nurse. I was very familiar with having my hands on injectable medication. And yet here I was like, but now it's my turn. What am I supposed to do here? I need help. And not having a lot of places to turn for that emotional aspect. And it's not minimizing your family or anything like that, but it can be a very isolating feeling. And I think even just a few years ago, people weren't talking about it as much either, openly. So having someone who you really have like that really intimate dynamic with is similarly to when you invite someone into your birth space. I think the bonds that are formed during that time can really lift you up, and that's important.
Yes, for sure. And potentially you could be there through the IVF process, through the birth, through the postpartum phase. Like what you could potentially spend over a year with somebody, right?
That's right.
Which is awesome. I love that. Have you done that yet with anyone through all of those phases?
I can tell you, prior to Nurses to Nurture formally being, here, we have done this for a lot of people for a long time in an informal setting. And we can't wait now to see our clients that we have now and how it evolves into, our mother roasting after birth and same pouring into them after the birth of the baby. So we're excited to see, where this all goes.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about some of the postpartum? I have like some notes here, but some of the things that you do in postpartum, like there's a closing of the bones. Yeah. I want to talk about that, but if there's more, let's dive in.
I think the concept goes back into, it's a term that you'll hear. It's mother roasting. So we all know about showering the baby. You have a baby shower. Mother roasting doesn't even necessarily start in that postpartum or after the baby period. It really starts through that pregnancy. So there are things that we can offer. If you're familiar with the blessing way, where you have, instead of a baby shower, it's basically a ceremonial aspect focused on the mother.
Okay.
And it's as simple as like foot baths. Go ahead.
Okay. So the blessing way is like honoring the mother instead of, you could have baby gifts if you want, but really the main thing is coming to shower the mother and having her closest friends come, foot bath and, bonding ceremonial. And each of the women that show up for this blessing way are there to support her with words of affirmation for her during the rest of the pregnancy, through the birth, and even through the postpartum period. And So that can be done. Sometimes I've seen it where each person brings a certain like gem to make a necklace, a birthing necklace for the time of the birth.
I love that.
So it starts there with the ceremonial aspect of recognizing she's going to become a mother. And then it goes in transitions going into closing of the bones. So after the birth process, mostly the mom is very open and wide during pregnancy and birth. And the thought with the closing of the bones, which is really common in a lot of other countries, not ours, but hopefully soon. But it's the thought of putting the mom back together and helping to support her emotionally, physically, mentally, and honoring her and what she just went through in this transition so that she can show up stronger as a mother. And that's with the support of her community. So the closing of the bones is really a beautiful thing. And it also can have physical benefits with, there's so much laxicity after birth and just like tightening everything back up. And mother roasting, the thought of it is hot heat. And so in a lot of other countries, especially in Southeast Asia, which is where I have my roots from, the thought is you really want to put heat back in after a birth because you are so wide open that any type of cold that comes through is something you want to avoid because cold could potentially bring infection, disease. But if you can keep the mother warm during that time after she's been so wide open and raw, then we're prompting the body to come back to balance, come back to a healing state, which all our bodies are capable of. So we're just honoring that in that time period with bringing that heat back in, whether it's through teas and herbs or that closing of the bones. And that can be done with just Taylor and I, or it can be done in the same aspect of that blessing way, having close friends there to honor her as she has already now transitioned into motherhood.
Oh, I love that. And now is it like, are you like wrapping her up?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
maybe I've got a hand motion going here. Like I'm stirring a pot.
It's called a sacred tuck. So we use our rebozos and cloth, and we sit on opposite ends of each other, and it's an equal balance of tightening and just bringing everything together. And then you ceremonially tuck. You also
affirmations as you go down. I think if you really think about the closing of the bones too, I like to break things down physically also, that you have the emotional aspect of it also, but you go through think of the physical opening of your body, how you have to birth a child. You're physically opening your pelvis, you're having to be vulnerable also in that emotional standpoint to show up, to deliver. It is that as you go down the body, providing affirmations, from the head to the toe, reminding the mother that she's making this transition. You're helping her to affirm that she's closing. And it can be a beautiful thing you do on your own, or it can be something you can share with other people and have a gathering out of it. And I think that goes back to everything we're doing is trying to help you feel your community. We've been community for each other. We've relied on that so heavily. And it's like, how do we let people know that, just trying to find that community and make it really close to you is that it will help you to show up as a better mother.
Yeah. I love that you're taking it back to kind of these ancient, rituals and, things like this, and really supporting the mother. So many people, I think just, it's our culture today to just, get back to work or, you feel this pressure to get back to the body. We've talked about that a lot on the podcast, but, if someone was not so, in tune or had the opportunity to do something like that, or their postpartum was just not as nurturing as, what we're speaking of here, what can you do? I feel like maybe some moms listening are like, oh, I didn't even think twice about myself or caring for myself. It was all about the baby, or maybe they were just in such a bad state, like beyond, maybe their kids are 4, 5, 6, and beyond now.
So you can still do it at any time. There's no time limit for the closing of the bones.
Oh, interesting.
And a lot of times too, we can prompt someone if they want to talk about their birth story. Sometimes just even sharing that story with someone else and listening to it is healing in having your birth story told, or maybe they don't even want to tell it. Maybe they're journaling while we are setting up the ceremony of the closing of the bones, and just even writing down their birth story can be helpful for them. But there's no limit. You can do it in 40 days after your birth or 40 years after your birth. I think it's always still so beneficial to have that honored and to be able to do that.
Yeah, I just did an incredible thing. Like I think going into pregnancy, I didn't really have a lot of, I don't know, nobody told me, not that I wasn't expecting anyone to tell me, but nobody really said like, this may not go the way, and of course you don't want to tell a pregnant mother that, right? But like, I feel like I was so naive to the whole process. And then what ended up happening was so traumatic in that whole thing. So I feel like this is part of my like service of like trying to support moms and in this whole phase, because if you were like me and totally naive, like there's so much support out there. There's people that can help you. There's things you can do after the fact to nourish your body, and really take the care and the time that you need.
I think that's important too. And like you, so I had a kind of crazy postpartum experience after my second child. And one of the biggest things that was helpful for me was my sister came and she prepped meals and just held space for me for over a week. And that's when for me, I started realizing, oh, I really need to show up in this postpartum space because no one's even talking about this.
Yeah.
And that wasn't even my first child. That was my second child. So I think it's never too late and it's so important. And that's why I'm so passionate about it as well, as from my own experience, that I want to hold that space for someone for them to feel safe and heard. And that sometimes things don't go as planned. Like never in my wildest dreams did I think that was going to happen, but yet it did. And it's not like I tell mothers, I don't go around telling everyone my birth story and what happened because I don't want to frighten anyone, because that doesn't mean it's always going to happen, but I think it's good when you have that support, that birth doula or that postpartum doula, that if something does happen, you have this support system to lean on. And even for your partner, I know that would have been really great for my partner to have even that support as well during that time. And it was helpful when my sister came. It almost took, he was helping with the kids and she was kind of taking care of me.
Yeah. And your husband's a firefighter, which my dad is a firefighter. So it's like and like you're saying, you're a nurse, but you felt overwhelmed. He saves lives, but yet he probably didn't really know what to do, right? Like with that thing. My husband was like deer in headlights. Like I remember he told me, I had a traumatic experience. And actually that's why originally Samara was like, you guys need to meet because I think we've actually never really spoken about our birth stories together. So maybe we have to do that at some point. But, that's why she was like, oh, it sounds similar to Charlene's birth. And, this is why you guys need to connect. So, but I remember my husband telling me that he was going to drink coffee and stay up all night, almost like stand guard. And we laugh about it now because I was like, that was your solution, that you were going to stay up for 24 hours? Like, what were we thinking,
But you're not thinking in that moment.
No, you're not.
And even us as two medical professionals, we're not thinking in that moment. You're in complete panic, fight or flight.
Yeah.
And it takes a village. I mean, I remember even at that point, Samara was out of town and she was like trying to talk my husband off the ledge. And, there was just so much to that story. But it is, you just go into these modes of like, that's why it's so important. And we talk about it often. We lean on each other so much, whether it's, if our child has an illness or there's behavioral things or it's a homeschool question or it's a medical question. Both of us have family members that we walk with through doctor visits and chronic conditions, or they've ended up in the hospital. And sometimes, as much as I am a nurse and an advocate, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, and I will text or call Taylor and say, am I thinking about this right? Like, is there something I'm missing that I need to be asking right now or looking at? And so we kind of check both of each other quite often.
Yeah. When did you realize that this, obviously you're good friends, but like, when did you realize, okay, we can do this. We've done it together and we can do this for other people. And this feels like the perfect kind of partnership.
I think we have been doing this for each other for a long time, but going back, we were in self-preservation mode for a long time over the last couple of years. So we were having this innate need to show up for other people. We've always had that servant heart. How do we do this while still managing, sometimes feeling like we're drowning at home ourselves? You have to find that balance. Really recently, I think we came out and we're like, we have to hit the ground running. We're doing this every day. We need to put a name on it. We need to make this, go ahead.
We also had to move 7 minutes away from each other.
Oh, you did?
We were
that was planned to try. Oh, okay.
No. But Taylor lived in Tequesta and I lived in West Palm. And then conveniently enough, 2.5, 3 years now.
COVID changed the game for us for sure.
Yeah.
When COVID happened, we ended up, we moved west, we moved out of town, and we ended up like, okay, we're spending more time physically together instead of on the phone talking each other off the ledge. So when we were blending our homeschool life and our day-to-day life, carpooling, and really everything just kind of naturally and organically turned into a business from there, from something we were doing for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I do want to talk about homeschooling because you guys just kind of touched on that. You both are homeschool moms. And I got to be honest, when I see all the things that you guys do with your children, like enrichment, I guess I'll call it, you were at like a Thai festival. You're like really immersing yourselves in, you're at like for Native American Heritage Month, you're like down in Fort Lauderdale, going to see what like their rituals and things that they do and the dancing and the headdresses and like all the beautiful things. Part of me is like, I would love to do that. I don't know. I'm just very intrigued by the whole process. Like, how did you get to the point where you felt like homeschooling was the right option? Talk about it with me.
We both have been homeschooling for a long time. I never saw myself as a homeschool mom. I really have only, my oldest is 10 right now. I have 10, 5, and 3. We're going to be transitioning from 1 to 2 kids at home next year. But for the homeschooling aspect, we tried public school. I thought it was going to be I loved the idea of him getting on a school bus and coming back at 2:00. But when COVID happened, we have dynamics within our family. We had to be a little bit more isolated. We had to protect the house. We pulled home and we homeschooled, and we were introduced to the idea of this, your child home with you and really being part of that foundation, molding them, really being in charge of what you are exposing them to. And I will say, unlike Charlene, I did once we moved, I went and tried him back at school for a semester and was like, okay, we're at a different school now. Maybe we'll see how things are. COVID land had slowed down a little bit. And just a couple of things that had happened at school that I was like, once we were introduced to the flexibility and the freedom, I said, we can't do this anymore. We pulled halfway through the year and we linked back up and started a school year in January. So we started fresh. Thankfully, I get to be the friend who just sends my kid a lot with her because I do have little ones at home that aren't always like for all the events. But thankfully I have friends who lead Samara going back to it is like a great planner. Charlene plans so much of these events and we get to just go along, but it's the experience, the whole experience of homeschooling, having those slower mornings with your kid. That's where some of our most cherished time is not getting up and rushing out for every little thing. It's carving that boredom into your kid's life that I think so often their schedules are packed full of, which we do run around more than I think a lot of people do for activities for our kids, kind of trying to piecemeal all these experiences for them. But it really is all those moments in between is what keeps me. Those are beautiful field trips and I love exposing my kid to them, but it's having them home and just free at home. Their best times are at home way more than when they're running and going other places. But Charlene is really so fortunately takes my child to all those enrichment activities.
And then, so for me, honestly, Samara is the ultimate. She kind of led the way. So she homeschooled first before I did. She was homeschooling way before. And same like Taylor, my oldest started out in the public school system. And then COVID happened and he had some speech needs at that time. And then once we decided to homeschool at that point, I said, this is no better time than right now than us. We're home. We're forced to be home. Let's do this. And it just went from there with my husband's schedule and my schedule. We the flexibility was like the first thing I was like, oh, this is great. We can go vacation. We can go to do these field trips. And then I started seeing the benefit for my son. He was actually gaining so much more than with one-on-one with me than what he was getting at school. Like being able to tailor his needs and not him just getting lost in that big class was such a big difference. And I saw it right away. And not only that, I saw, I had Samara and I had another friend that were very involved. And so they kind of like led the way for me in the beginning with all these field trips and how to incorporate books and like a whole study. So it's not just a field trip. We don't just stop there. A lot of times there's like a curriculum that we'll add to it, or we'll make them read up on something. So a lot of times we'll go to the Kravis Center for our shows. And then from there, we'll like talk about it some more, or we'll find some books to like kind of integrate it all together. And so a lot of times we'll bounce each other off. I will say Samara's like the ultimate. She finds some crazy things that I'm like, how'd you even see that? Where did you even come up with that?
I'm always inspired. I mean, by all three of you, but always inspired by seeing that. And I've tried to like weave more of that into our lives too, just like you guys leading by example. So now when you're doing lessons, because I know nothing about homeschooling, but I'm definitely intrigued by it. When you're doing stuff at home, like lessons, is that like workbooks? Is it online? How does that work?
So every year we've kind of pivot. That's our motto. We pivot every year. We kind of gauge like, well, what worked, what didn't work, what are we keeping, what are we changing? And sometimes that's even different for both of us so I have two kids that I homeschool, and then this will be Taylor's first year having both of them. Last year was our first year. We actually went into a hybrid program where they do some of the curriculum for us, and they're going somewhere 2 days a week, and then we have them the other 3 days. So it allowed us to kind of focus a little bit more on the enrichment because someone was focusing on the basic curriculum. But it can be in the past when it's been us, we've used certain workbooks, and there's so much curriculum out there. And that's a common question. A lot of times I'll have someone ask me, well, what curriculum did you use? And I mean, we went through like 3 or 4 before we could find something that worked for us, and it may not work for someone else. So I always say, if you can sample something, sample it, see, don't be upset if it doesn't work. But try different curriculums. But there's workbooks, there's self-study, there's things online, there's these hybrid programs. So I feel like it's just every year there's more and more growth in the homeschool community, which is amazing. So there's so much more options and different little pods and field trips and ways for the kids to get together.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, a lot of people think, oh, they don't get enough socialization or what, all the negatives of it. But I can tell you just by seeing what you guys do, they're getting plenty of socialization, and they're doing such amazing, cool things. They're involved in sports, and there's plenty of opportunities to do that. Now, does it ever feel like a lot of pressure? Like you have taken this on and it feels, because that I did consider it actually. I think with COVID, it changed a lot of things for a lot of people, and things that you would never really have thought about. Maybe you're kind of considering at that point. So I definitely thought, and then I thought, oh my God, I'll probably divorce my husband if, I just don't know, like I'll probably be so strung out. Does it feel like a lot of pressure sometimes?
I think for myself and my house I go back to COVID changed our life. We had to make a lot of changes really fast. And with that came new opportunities. When we experienced those opportunities, we were able to, again, pivot every year, take what we liked out of it, get rid of what didn't work. I can tell you there is pressure every single day to try to ensure the prioritization of everybody's needs. Like education is important, but how do I remain a person in an individual myself while I'm fully immersed in my kid's schedule? It definitely limits your flexibility, what you're able to do. I have a husband who works Monday through Friday, regular business hours. So a lot of that week to week stuff does fall on me. And that means that I'm not also running out and getting a Monday through Friday job in order to homeschool my child. That is a sacrifice that we made in order for me now to remain home with them. And it's something we have to revisit every year as we go into the next school year. But the reward that it has come with, and it is also kind of what has pushed us to create something on our own that we can be flexible around. Because once we had experienced it, there was really no going all the way back, or at least not right now. Can't speak for next year or the year after.
Yeah.
But right now, what it's bringing to our family is it's worth that stress, but 100%, I would say you would be lying to say that you wake up every day and say, this is easy. I lose my patience probably more than I'd like to lose my patience. But at the end of the day, we're really making the sacrifices to make it happen.
Yeah.
And I would say the same. I was going to say, don't interview my husband.
Yeah. Don't ask him his opinion.
And we're a little bit different because my husband works a shift schedule. So he is somewhat involved in our homeschool. We're pretty, we're pretty even. I would say maybe I'm a little bit more, but he'll equally sometimes take all our kids, Taylor's son included. He'll take them on a field trip if I can't do it. So he's really involved in that way. And sometimes I will give him one subject to focus on and I'll focus on the others because he has that flexibility of his shift. So we are definitely partners in my household where my husband is involved in the homeschool process with us. And he enjoys it. He enjoys getting that extra time with them. We talk about it all the time. Like, these are the years we're going to remember. And it's almost like we get to preserve this childhood into a longer period of time where we've had them more and they're not gone away. So both of my kids play travel sports, and that evening time we are going nonstop Monday through Thursday and then on the weekends. So I often think, if we didn't homeschool, when would I see my kids? But the pressure is definitely there. And I feel like that's oftentimes why we pivot to see, where can we take a little bit of this pressure off? Is it doing this hybrid program? Is it doing 2 days of the hybrid program? Is it doing 1 day? Is it keeping this subject there and then me taking it back? Is it hiring a tutor? These are all things that constantly go on. And then it even goes on between both of our households because our lives are so intertwined. But that's also what makes it work, is the homeschool community is so beautiful. A lot of times someone will pick up my kid if I can't go, or if I can't make it there, or I can't make it to the field trip. We've formed these bonds in this homeschool community with other mothers and their kids, that you kind of feel safe to have them with your child if for some reason you can't get there.
Yeah. You have to be really intentional with, I'm sure, who you choose to kind of bring into that group, right?
And we do like a once a week, we rotate houses, or, we'll host it at our house, or we'll do a tutoring session, because we have kind of figured out over the years what we feel capable of and what makes us feel like we're reaching the limit of that stress line of this is too much, whether it's a subject or, what can we put them together so that they can work together still in that group setting, but in a smaller setting at home. So once a week we have, 4 to 6 kids sitting at the dining room table. We bring a tutor in for a couple hours, and that allows us to have some time to work on some of these other things. It takes something off of our plate that we didn't really have the energy investment into, or that we feel like they're benefiting more having that more teacher setting. And then they have time to play after. We make a lunch together, we feed everybody, and then sometimes we sit back down and let them work again together. So it is every year doing something a little bit differently, but consistently we lean on each other in different ways to really put it together, to make it a whole operation, because it would be very hard to do on your own.
Yeah.
And I would say too, one of the best things about homeschooling is getting to try things that your child may like. So for instance, I have one child who just loves history, and we've gone to see a professor do talks on history, and that he loves that. My other kid is like extremely bored and is asking me why we're there, but it allows me to tailor that need for that child. So if it's marine biology, is it history, is it engineering, whatever it is, it kind of gives you a little bit of that flexibility to say, let's focus on this a little bit more, truly invest our time in it and see where this goes.
I love that. It's so beautiful. I thank you for sharing your experience about that, because maybe I just haven't asked the questions with anyone else, but yeah, it sounds like a very special experience for your kids and for you. And if one day it doesn't work, then like you said, you can reevaluate and do something different. Just like we all can. Yeah.
Forever pivoting.
Well, and that's a great thing. We should all feel that way. I do remember one mom, and I have one son, but, and this particular mom had 4 kids, and she was like, every year I take it kid by kid and situation by situation. And she did have like 2 kids at one school, they were all kind of spread out, but she really committed to doing the right thing for each child. And I think about that in my own mind every year. You evaluate the sports, the activities, whatever you're going to be doing that year, just be intentional and figure out if it's really working for your family, right? That's all you can do. Yeah. I want to talk about community because you guys you started doing Blue Zone gatherings. And I actually went to one of them. And so talk about how that idea came about. I don't know, people know there's a documentary on Netflix. It was really popular, talking about the blue zones all over the world. And so those are places where people were like living longer, happier, lives. So tell me about these gatherings you guys are doing.
I think we always go back to so much of what the core of what we are is community. I think that goes back to a lot of who we are and how we became the people we are. Community has always been so important to me. Growing up in Jupiter, I witnessed things that were, very mom and pop style. Everybody knew everybody. You were the center. My grandfather was one of the very first providers in Jupiter.
Okay.
And he was, you can't go many places people who didn't know who he was and
What's
what
his
he did.
Name?
Dr. Grogan.
Okay.
So he had the first office in the Tequesta area, and he basically just that experience of growing up in a small town, because Jupiter was a small town, even, back when I was growing up.
Yeah.
You went everywhere you went, everybody knew who everybody was, and everybody had a story of how he was able to step in and be something instrumental in his life, a service that he gave away, what he offered the high school teams, just all the way down. When Charlene and I were, living separately, she lived in West Palm and I lived in Jupiter. We were community over the phone, but there was still that piece missing because we were in the thick of it. We weren't spending time one-on-one together. When we ended up living in the same area where we were, a stone's, throw away, we were together all the time. And when we realized what it was doing for our children, having that opportunity, just like we were talking homeschool, really immersing them in that community lifestyle, growing up, feeling comfortable and confident in, social settings, it's leaning on other people for all of your needs, not some of your needs. The Blue Zone, I think we love the aspect of the food as focused, food as medicine, but it goes well beyond the food aspect. It really is feeling like you belong somewhere. Mm-hmm. And I think introducing that to your children on a regular basis, feeling like they are comfortable in their own skin, they are nourishing their bodies with things that are good for them, and we're being intentional in our words and why we're gathering, because we're here to support other people. We want to bring community in, and I think that those benefits, they're lifelong.
Yeah.
Yeah, same. So I got to experience a really strong community with my little ones living in West Palm. There's a group of ladies down there in the Montessori school we went to at that time. I had a really strong group of moms, and we did these beach Friday nights. So that's really kind of where that stemmed from. And so once I moved up this way, I was like, oh, we need this up here too. Mm-hmm. And like Taylor said, we were meeting so frequently and our kids were benefiting from that community that we wanted to bring that in. And it's everything what we are. That community is so important. If we stand together, there's so much healing that can be involved in that, and bringing a group of women together. And a lot of times the conversations at our Blue Zones go from anywhere from homeschooling questions, health and wellness, family, what do you do for this when your child does this? And the kids are playing together, and there's all this great food to nourish your body, that it's just such an amazing thing. I've had multiple moms tell me, it was just so nice to meet with a group of women that had same things that I believe in, or being able to talk openly like that. It filled my cup. And I think that's what we really want to bring back, is that you can find that in your community, and it's there.
Yeah. No, it was really great. When I went, it was a beautiful night. The food was fantastic. You encouraged people to bring something as well. And I would say, I'm not like a whiz in the kitchen, but I brought something. Mine was store-bought, but I think everyone else's was homemade.
No, there was some other stores, okay. And there's no pressure on it.
My goal is to actually make something maybe for the next one. Do you have one planned?
We had to put a hold on May, so we have a date picked for June. So we're going to go ahead and announce our June date here shortly.
Yeah. Okay, good. I'm so glad, because that was really special. I think you guys should keep up with that. And I'm sure it'll grow. And but the Friday night beach nights are magical too. So.
Well, we've moved it to the beach, so that also helps. We've gone back to a beach location now that it's summer, the time change. You could definitely find us on a beach long past the sun going down this summer.
Yeah. Oh, that's so nice. Well, I want to come.
Yes.
Okay. Because this is the cinnamon effect, and I use cinnamon as like a metaphor for life, like what I think makes life better, sweeter, happier, more fulfilling. So I want to know from each of you, one thing that you do in your life that you think it can be anything, a ritual, routine, something with your children, your spouse. What makes your life just that little bit better?
You could go.
I kind of sprung that on you guys.
So I'm big on meditation, and I spend at least 15 minutes a day on meditation. And I think that's so important. And that's something that's been ingrained in me since I was younger. My mom was a meditator. So that's just something I've always done. But one of the other things I do, and it's been quite some time, but I think I realized it with my second child. Every morning, 15 minutes, I need to at least sit out and get morning sun.
Oh, nice.
And I'll drink my tea or whatever I'm drinking and just like take in that moment of, okay, this is my time before the day starts. And then I would say the other one, I'm probably really trying to be at the beach once a week and getting in that ocean. Those are my three things, my three must-haves.
Those are good must-haves, I would say. What about you, Taylor?
Well, still in the season of little kids and little to bigger. So I don't have so much of that peace and quiet in the morning because when I get up, usually someone is following behind me. But I really think that at the end of the day, what helps me the most is reflection, and it doesn't matter where I do it or how I do it. But we have a lot of circumstances at home, having a medically fragile child who has to deal with things on a regular basis every day. And it is that conversation circling around while she is dealing with something so, a rare disease that we kind of navigate blindly. It is that ultimately reflecting back and feeling really grateful for the health that we do have for her. And I think that, and not that I want to put all of our family on one person, but being really intentional and grateful about how lucky we are, how blessed we are, and reminding ourselves that it didn't have to look that way, or maybe it wasn't going to look that way. And we're fortunate enough right now that it does. And so it's living in the now. And I have a hard time with that, I think, as that's definitely a flaw of mine, is to live in the future, to be worried about anticipating things that might not ever happen. So it is really something that I work on every day, is gratitude. Feeling grateful for today is something that my self-talk I have every day, because I can get lost in the next, thing that might not ever happen. But gratitude, I think it goes to all aspects of my life. I hope to, I work on that every day.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you guys are both so special. I'm so happy to know you. I'm so happy that you came here and could share some information with us and what your mission is. And I think you're two very special people for holding the space that you do for other people and just giving your lives to that. I really feel that from you guys. So really appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having
us. Thank you for coming. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of The Cinnamon Effect. If you liked the episode, please rate, review, share it with someone you love. Oh, and before we go, tell us where people can find you.
You can find us on Instagram at Nurses to Nurture. And then from there, you can also find our public pages as well. We're also on Facebook, but you can also find us at the beach at our Blue Zone nights.
Yeah. What do you call it?
Mile marker.
Yeah, mile marker.
We tend to, we kind of go back and forth depending on the weather and if the kids can get into the trees at night.
Yeah.
Typically Carlin will probably be the
spot. Okay. Close to me. So I love that. All right. Thanks, ladies.